What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Burndown YouTube channel. And I wanted to sit and take a minute, do a little story time with you. So for those of you that are interested, I was on 1320 video, and I figured I would give you guys kind of the recap and maybe some of the behind the scenes stuff on LS Fest 2022. Got the shirt, I lived, survived it. And I think it'd be fun for you guys to kind of realize it, because through the lens of social media, a lot of people just share the things they want you to see, and they don't share like the bad things. And that's one thing I always try to do with you guys, is share the good as well as the bad, because it's real life. You know, not everything is perfect. But I feel like the LS Fest thing was almost like my race week experience. Like, if you didn't really know the behind the scenes or pay attention, it just looked like I went there and accomplished it, came home, and you know, life was all rosy and good. So we the start of the trip, if you watch the video, you'll notice that I'm not quite as animated as I normally am, and it was a twofold deal. One, I was a little nervous because of the condition of the Bago, and I knew that I had to wood the thing because we're on 1320, and I'm like, I don't know. And then two, I had been up for hours and hours on end getting that thing ready to get it out to Vegas. So let's rewind my trip there. So if you are familiar with the channel, you know that I basically cut off making videos the week before LS Fest West. I wanted to debut the Twinnebago, and at that point it wasn't excuse me, it wasn't painted or anything. I'd started working on it, and I showed you guys like the bumpers and some little stuff that I had done. But I know I had put the rendering out there before, and I showed everybody that I wanted it gold, but I figured there's no way I had enough time to finish that thing and film it all in the same week. I even basically quit working that whole week. I mean, I put a lot of effort in, and at one point, some of the sponsor stickers on the bottom are crooked. I was out there with my headlamp at like 11 at night. I was cutting stickers, and then, because I have my own vinyl machine, and then I was putting them in like in the dark and just trying to do one of these. So, I mean, I took it all the way down to the wire. We left fairly late, and I was trying to explain to my wife that it's not like driving a car. When you drive an RV or you tow, for those of you that are familiar with it, you know that you drive slow. Like, you get in, you're not in a hurry, but you got to give yourself a lot of time for stops, for unexpected stuff, maybe something loose on the trailer, maybe you need to make extra fuel stops because things guzzling, you know, gas and E85 and diesel when you're towing heavy loads. So I was trying to explain to her, I was like, we're going to average like 55 miles an hour, like 60, you know, kind of pushing it. We left here at like 11, and I got there with 4 minutes to spare. They closed at 7, they closed the windows, and I really thought we were going to have to camp outside of LS Fest West and wait for it to open in the morning to go get a spot. And then on top of that, my car ran and it drove on the trailer, but it wasn't running. I had to replace the fuel pump, and I was still having fuel issues when we left here. So, I mean, it was a giant fiasco, to say the least, and I do have it on camera. You guys can watch me, like, wood the thing and try to get there in the nick of time. And I laughed because you would think that it was something that I made up. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great for drama. No, that's my life. That's how I'm just that guy that it's always kind of last minute by the skin of my teeth, and we always make it happen. And I'm just bringing you guys along for the ride, and it happens so much. That's why a lot of people are like, wow, you seem really laid back. If I wasn't laid back and just was like, hey, it is what it is, I would be all gray by now. I would probably have heart issues, and I do get stressed out, you know, don't get me wrong, but I've learned to just let go, and just, there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, it is what it is. So we were lucky to make it. I was very stressed about that, and I was wooding the Winnebago toward the end. Me and the boy were cooking pretty good in the thing, and I was like, it's either gonna shake apart or we're gonna make it on time. Well, you know how that story ended. So that was the long-winded version of how we kind of got there. And then I had went on Rocky Mountain Race Week 2021, so last year. So that's coming up really soon for this year's event, which I'm not gonna be able to make. Obviously, due to like finances and everything else, I'm a small guy, and my goal was to get the Twinnebago out, because I had been kind of sitting on that project and getting it ready, and I can only kind of do one large event a year is really all that's in the cards for me. So we scrapped Race Week this year, but we're gonna try to go back next year. So LS Fest was my big event, but I did get to go last year, and I ended up in the 10-0 class because I didn't have enough safety, and it just so happened that Kyle, that runs 1320 video, brought out his Audi. I think it's an R8, very cool car. It's turboed, and the thing is way faster than 10.0, but I think he was in the same predicament. Like, I don't think he had enough safety or whatever the rules were. I don't think he could run any quicker. So he opted, you know, 10.0 is the fastest he can run. So we were both in the class, which was awesome because it gave me a reason to actually kind of interact and talk to him aside from just like fanboying or trying to make up nonsense, which I'm sure I do that. Like if I see people I want to talk to, I'll go kind of BS with them. I've talked to Cletus and a few different YouTubers and things, and I just run up on them, kind of hand them a sticker just to say hi for the most part. But it was nice that we had something in common and we were battling for a position for a few days. So it was pretty cool to get the camaraderie and to get to kind of hang out. And that was some of the only fun I really had besides all the struggle that went down. But at one point, I did show him video of the Twinnebago. I was like, man, LS Fest, because I had already planned from that event that LS Fest was where the Bago was getting debuted. I told them all about it. They all giggled at the video, and I, rambled on about it. And then he straight told me, like, they don't go to California that much. They're not going to really, they don't do LS Fest, over here, and so on and so forth. So I was, in a million years, I never expected to see them there. So I was in lanes in my car, suited up. I don't know how many pass. I think it was like my first pass. I was trying to take the car on, and I seen the red golf cart, and I look over, and I could spot Fred. You can spot Fred a mile away at the white glasses and the big old beard and hat. And it was him and Whitty. And I stopped my car in lanes, like I wasn't even into the lanes yet, and I was like, dancing around like, what's up, guys? Because I was so excited. As soon as I saw him, I'm like, man, this is perfect because they are here, and the Winnebago's here, and we're going to make some magic happen. So I waved him over, and we kind of BS'd a little bit, and I told him what I had, and immediately his immediate reaction was, is it here? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, and it's turboed, and it's ready to go. And he's like, where is it? They hadn't seen it yet. And he waited for me to make my pass, and then he immediately came right over to the pits and was just, just like everybody else that sees the Winnebago that's a car person, it's, love at first sight, and you're like, this thing is just, it's something else. I call it, it's like a bulldog. I have a big fascination with bulldogs. I had a couple bulldogs, they've all passed away. I'll get a bulldog in the future, but it's just so ugly, and it's just this meaty, just awesome thing that you're like, it's so ugly, it's cute type deal, like with the bulldog. It's like the smush face, just big box of a motorhome that's terrible, but it's so terrible it went back, the needle swung the other way. It's like rolling the odometer over. You went from like 1,000,000 miles back to 0, now it's awesome again. So they enjoyed it. I showed them everything about it, and then he was kind of asking, he was really cool about asking about, can we kind of get it, like, he wasn't trying to push boundaries. They weren't like, hey, let's get in it and go break things. Like, that's kind of how like Hoonigan is. Like, Hoonigan's like, let's get in it and burn this thing up, and we want to get it on video. They are complete opposite of like Hoonigan. They are very respectful. He's like, we'll just video the thing, like kind of whatever you want to do. We don't want to step on any toes or whatever. And I was like, dude, you guys are here. We're going for a ride. So I was like, started unloading stuff. He's like, oh, you don't have to unload stuff. And I'm like, oh, dude, things will be everywhere in this because, so I had to unload my everything that we had. So when you see me kind of in the video, if you look over, if you go back and watch it, all my stuff is out there. So like when they're videoing, they walk through and they show the inside. Yeah, that was packed with all of our stuff to camp in. So that was all on our pit mat outside, and my wife and my kid were sitting in the lawn chairs with all of our junk, and like I just pile in the dudes and we just like take off, And so I was a little nervous because we had sprung a transmission leak on the way out. Lo and behold, though, I had some extra transmission lines that went back to coolers that I had in there if you followed along long enough, and they still had fluid in it. So those were compounding the problem because they were kind of burping and puking, I think, as we were rolling on the exhaust, like making it seem worse than it was. And then it did, in fact, have a pressure leak, but it wasn't as bad as with all the smoke and everything that I initially thought. So that was kind of on me. I found that, when I got back. But when I loaded those guys up to go for a ride, I was like, man, I got a 300-something mile trip, and I had struggles getting out there. So I'm like, this might not be that great. It's going to be great for content, but I'm hoping that everything goes well. We can bring them back. And then I was like, I don't really want to mess with this thing the rest of the trip because it has to get my family back home safe. So people are, trying to egg me on to like take it to the burnout pit and to run it down the track. And then I already knew it had that transmission leak. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to roach this thing if I'm a complete knucklehead. But we did do plenty of photo shoots. I drove the guys from Holley around. And then the guys from 1320 were the only ones that we got to take on a ride. So some fun backstory, though, was I didn't have the correct sticker on it because you get your tow vehicle, you get all your stuff in, and everything's kind of registered for the event. Well, I didn't have the correct sticker on the window, so we go to roll out because I was like, I can't be a knucklehead in LS Fest, so we want to go find a road that I could, take them on a ride on. And the lady was mean at the gate, and she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I want to take these guys. And then she was asking, she's like, who are they? And he's like holding up his media badge. She's like, oh, we're media. And she's like, who are you guys with again? And it was funny because she was so mean that I was waiting for them to like chime in and kind of help me out, but they'd never been there before. So Fred was just like quiet. Then Whitney just like hid like a little kid behind me, like in the seat. So I was taking all this heat from like this older lady. And then finally she let us go out, and then I drove through, and it was funny because it was like dead silent, like they're quiet. And like we get out of the gate, and I was like, hey, thanks for the help, guys. Thanks, man. And they're like, oh yeah, she was pretty mean. Like, it was pretty funny because as soon as she started kind of like yelling, I'm like, well, they're media. Like, he's gonna be like, hey, lady, you know, we're from whatever. No, Fred just like kind of sat back, and Whitney like sunk down so she couldn't see him and like yell at him. So that was pretty funny. But ultimately, we did get out and back in. And then I unpacked, I took the propane bottles out of it. I think I left the generator out, and then I figured, you know, we'd be safe, and if we're going to be knuckleheads, you know, we'd be as safe as we can. And obviously, we weren't doing anything too crazy. I mean, we were, you know, we wooded the thing, but it was having its own issues anyways. But the thing I forgot was to lock the stupid fridge, and all my food was still in there. And we wooded the thing, and there was a curve, so then I went around the curve the first time, and then when we turned around, I was like, well, we just might as well make a pull on the way back. So I did the same thing, and I held it a bit longer. And we were probably lucky anyway. It was breaking up real bad. And come to find out, I had 2 burned plug wires. Excuse me. I had 2 burned plug wires in that thing that I ended up finding later on. But that probably saved me because my tune was a little spicy. My buddy Happel helped me correct it before we tried to do the burnout. So they probably would have got a hell of a ride, and I don't know if the rods would have stayed in the thing, but you know, it's one of those deals. It is a stock rod engine. I do have pistons from Holley, but I didn't have anybody on board at that point for rods, so it just has some Gen 4 rods on some Holley pistons that's in a junkyard 6-liter. So the burnt plugs probably saved me because it really wouldn't come up on it. Like, it was under boost and it was going, but I didn't want to make excuses. I did mention, I was like, oh, maybe it's hitting a safety cut or something, because I didn't really know exactly what it was. But we were trying. I just held the thing down, and it didn't sound all that happy, but it still made some RPM. It got in a boost, and the thing went. We were on 91, so typically we have 8 good cylinders instead of like 6, and then we run on E. And it's when you get it after it, people are pretty surprised. So I realized that they'd never been in a motorhome, and especially a motorhome like that was that fast. So there's really no reason to like poo-poo on your own stuff and be like, oh, it could have, you know, I don't want to be an excuse guy. And I saw they were having fun, and I was like, as long as you guys are having fun, this is great. You know, I'm having fun too. But I knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, ah, man, I wish we were on E, and you know, and the thing was running properly, because it's a bit more of a beast than what they got to experience. But all in all, I guarantee it's the fastest motorhome they've ever been in. So that was plenty of fun. They were excited. They made the face that everybody makes with the jaws and the open mouths and stuff. So we had a great time. Unfortunately, they were the only people I really got to take for a ride. I did take my buddy Kane. I took the guys from Holley, so we cruised around a bunch. But ultimately, I wasn't really trying to take it out and tear it up every single time. And the most exhausting thing was, because we used it as a camper, every time somebody wanted to do a photo shoot or they wanted to look at her riding it, I unloaded everything. And so that way they could get clean pictures of the inside, and then I take the seat off to show the motor. So between doing all that for a handful of like media outlets, I was still trying to run my car too. And luckily I was just in the grudge tested tune, so I didn't have a stringent schedule. And I stayed in the tested tune. I debated actually trying to race, but I didn't have a running car. I put a fuel pump in, and then the whole first day I just left it on gate, and we were sneaking up on it to make sure that things were working. I even hit like a safety cut on day 1, messing with stuff. So we had our fair share of issues, and then by like day 2, we turned it up a bit enough to run a 140 mile-an-hour pass, and that was the highlight of my trip. That, and then making it back home. And then the only other thing is on the way home. So on the way home, my son ended up getting sick, so he didn't really eat really good that day because our food and stuff was kind of gone, and it was so chaotic. And if he doesn't eat for whatever reason, I don't know if it's like an acid reflux deal or whatever, he'll actually puke. So I don't know if he got a bug or if it's because he didn't really eat that well. So the next day we're supposed to leave to go home, so my son's like puking. So I have the Winnebago driving home, and then I have a bucket, and then he's chilling. He was such a good sport though. The boy's only 6, and he didn't really complain. He actually made it to the bathroom a couple times, so it was really handy to have a bathroom where you could go vomit while you're driving, so that was fun. And then I've been chasing heating issues on this thing ever since I've had it. And there's no handbook on cooling. I don't even know what this thing weighs. I'm guessing somewhere around, between 10 and 12,000 pounds. And obviously having turbos up front doesn't help things, and so on. But we've gotten it worked out for the most part, but the power steering was overheating. And it sounds odd, but it controls the hydro boost. So you've got the hydro boost and the power steering, and then the way it's in the doghouse, the fans just kind of blow on the reservoir, and I think it just heat soaks it. It's like holding a heat gun or like a hair dryer or something on a plastic bottle that has liquid in it, and you do that for 6 hours, 7 hours straight with like 200-degree air temp. Of course it's going to get hot, right? And it's not really getting out of the reservoir. When it gets out, it's getting squeezed and compressed and then put right back in. So I had a little baby cooler up front, but on the way there and the way back, we got caught in traffic as usual, and then pushing the brakes a bunch in traffic. I'm not steering, but we're using the brake and then not getting a lot of airflow. I think we got to the high desert area and we had to pull off, and it was getting warm, and I'm like, we'll just kind of shut it down. Like the whole thing was kind of getting warm, and what happens is when it starts to heat up, it would compound, because when it gets hot, the brakes would expand because of the hydro boost, so they would rub and ride, so in turn it lugs the transmission and motor, so everything starts laboring, and then it creates more heat, and it's just this downward spiral. As soon as the thing got kind of warmer or hot, you just drive off a cliff. So we pulled over and shut it off, and my son's like, Dad, what's that white smoke? And I look over, and there's smoke coming out from the doghouse, and I thought the thing had caught fire or something. So I just grabbed him, took him outside. I have an extinguisher. I got a couple extinguishers on board, and I put him outside, and I said, go stand over here, and grab an extinguisher and like drop down and like see if something was burning. And the power steering reservoir just vomited all over the hot side, because the hot side goes forward for the turbos, and it just lit up this big old plume of white smoke. And luckily, thank God, nothing caught fire. I don't know what the flash point of power steering fluid is. I know transmission fluid is flammable. We weren't quite there, and it just smoked the whole inside of the RV out. So I had to sit in Victorville with all the windows open to let all the smoke out of that. And then I also had a fan going bad, so on the backside of Baker, one of my Spall fans didn't kick off, so it got hot going up the grade. So I pulled over at a certain point there, and we cooled it back down. And then my water squirters quit working because I popped a fuse from screwing with it in the pits and unplugging and plugging the generator in the way I kind of have it rigged up. The power source shares a 12-volt feed that's supposed to just keep my fridge running, because I don't have the 12-volt in the back really flushed out yet. So long story short, it was a bit of the struggle bus. We made it with a bit of ingenuity, a bit of laying under it, and it was a very long drive there and back. But she made it, and then I've since put a better cooler on it, and I'm feeling way better about the deal. And on top of that, I still got to go talk to Champion, and I'm thinking if we can get a core that's a bit taller and throw another gallon or two, because there's a lot of space for me to fill up with that radiator, and we can get that radiator up a little higher into some clean air, this thing will be a monster. And then it's going to be trying to tow with it is going to be the real challenge. So I think if we tow, I'm expecting it to drive and work like a normal older RV. So a normal older RV, people would travel at night, kind of when it was cool. You don't want to go like midday. You're definitely not trying to pull hills midday, or if there's a hill, you want to stop and give stuff a break before you take a run at it type deal. So towing, even with all the cooling I can throw at that thing, I'm going to treat it like that so that it survives. Like if we got some hills and some stuff, we're either going to run them kind of mid-morning or later. We'll see how it goes. But without towing, if we get a little more radiator underneath that thing, and I'm going to put a little oil cooler on it, that thing will go anywhere. I'm going to be super stoked, and I'd like to take it a lot further to other events and things. And toward the end of the year, we may try again after we put the transmission that you guys are shooting. The transmission is in pieces for me to try to do a burnout. And we still have to accomplish that, so I got to put this thing back together, slap it back in, do the smoky burnout, and then we can focus on doing even more fun stuff with the Twinnebago. So that was my long-winded story. That was all the stuff that kind of happened. If you watched it on social media, I mean, I post some pictures up here and there, but ultimately, it's a bit of a struggle getting there and back. It wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't too bad. If you were an average individual and you weren't such a nut, I think, like I am, and you didn't put the thing together yourself, you probably would have panicked quite a few times. But I've been outside my comfort zone enough, especially like Rocky Mountain Race Week, and then building this thing, I took it to Kern River, and it didn't have half the cooling it has now. I don't even know how we made that trip the first go around. But I'm feeling a lot more confident in it, and the skill set, and the direction the thing is kind of gone. So it's very fun. I have a lot more stuff to do. I'm a little bummed I roached the transmission, but not really, because it was a junkyard deal. And I'd like to build a stout transmission that's good to go, because I really don't want to worry about it at all. I want to take it a lot more places. I've got some fun stuff to do with it. And then ultimately, like I said, I'd like to tow with it. And I don't think for a minute that that transmission that was in it, if I tried to tow with it, it would have smoked that transmission. Like if I tried to take it to Vegas, I don't think we would have made it to Vegas trying to tow with that setup. So hopefully we'll get it lined out. Worst case, we'll do truck and trailer, and then I'll just drive the Bago. I mean, I'm not trying to really be a hero, but if we can get it to tow and it feels like it'll do it, and it's not really dying and struggling, that's what we'll do. Worst case, we'll do truck and trailer, and then the Bago will just roll separate, and it'll be our home base, and then that's kind of a better deal anyway, even though it's way more money in fuel, because I'll have 2 vehicles. But if anything happens, at least you got a chase vehicle, or when you're posted up at the pits and you got to go somewhere. That's the only thing about towing with your RV, is I'm basically screwed unless I took the Malibu somewhere, which it's a street legal car, but shopping for groceries and taking your race car to Walmart when you're just trying to camp or whatever is kind of like unless it's race week, and then that's what you do. But that's it. That's my backstory. I hope you guys have a fantastic Friday. I want to share that with you. We got more stuff to come, more content. I have to figure out what I'm working on. We're still saving up pennies for transmission parts and for front tires on the Malibu, but a lot of the stuff's getting sorted out, and having some fun is just around the corner. You guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, share. Till next time, I'm out.